All right, the Timbre Wolf. This is, in my opinion, one of the most misunderstood, underrated synths ever. And this is going to contradict so much of the other YouTube videos you see on YouTube by oftentimes synth reviewers who are way more experienced and maybe know more about this stuff than I would. You could do a lot of stuff with this. You could do a lot of really basic synth sounds. What I like about this synth is that it really won't take you way off the reservation, and you're going to be able to do a lot of really classic sounds with it. And then it's got this, what amounts to, call it a 1632/64 step sequencer. It's got two 16-step sequencers, A and a B, and then you can alternate them with fills that can vary those. And what an awesome tool. It reminds me of the XR20 drum machine. I have one of those, and it was really great for doing cover songs. And often in music, if anybody who does a lot of cover songs, you'll find that often in music is they'll have two different patterns. You might have a verse and a chorus, maybe another bridge, something like that. But basically, you have two main parts, and then those two parts, if you can alternate them a little bit, then it just kind of makes things a little bit more interesting. And with that kind of setup, you have that here. Now, I haven't actually I've only had this thing for a few days. I haven't even messed with the sequencer yet. But I'm just saying we know that that's a fact that it has that. And the fact that it has that, I mean, it has a lot of very practical functions. Those are very practical functions. Number one, I want to talk about something, or number two is polyphony. Okay, so this thing is a 4-voice synth, and it has true polyphony in the sense that each voice has its own parameters. At least from what I've read on Facebook. I'm not Facebook, but YouTube. One thing I will say about the polyphony thing, that the argument that's out there is we see so many, there's an implied complaint about synths, like the Poly D, for example, Behringer's Poly D. They'll say it's not a true polyphonic synth. I never really followed this exactly because in the world of, I don't know when polyphony had anything to do with anything besides how many MIDI notes you could play at the same time. For years and years and years. I mean, maybe it's because I grew up in the digital age, but if you say something has 64-note polyphony, that's simply a measurement of how many MIDI notes you could play at the same time. And if you have a digital polyphonic synth, each one of those voices, as far as I know, never each note doesn't have its own filter. Okay, each voice does not have its own filter. You don't get a different filter, okay, with every single voice. Necessarily. Now, you could have multi-tracks and things like that and drum sounds and all kinds of stuff. You could say that's maybe sort of implied. But if you got a piano sound, a basic keyboard sound, and you say that it has 12-note polyphony or 24-note polyphony or whatever the polyphony is on a digital synth, you don't say it doesn't have that polyphony because there isn't a separate filter every single time you press a different key. But somehow this type of jargon got infiltrated. Maybe it was there before during the era of polyphonic synths or during the era of analog synths. I don't know. But either way, this thing you could definitely play 4 different voices. It's a true polyphonic synth. And ironically, we see so many synth reviewers out there that just don't like it. What Akai did is they actually made the synth that y'all have been asking for a long time. They're too complicated. Okay, we can't get the sounds we want to get out of them. We don't have high enough polyphony. The sequencer is only a 16-note sequencer, or does it have one? Well, they made that synth, and then everybody decided that they didn't like it. And if you watch video after video on YouTube, you'll find reviewer after reviewer talking about how the limited parameters. Limited? Well, if you're looking for a synth that will give you, if you're a sampler, let's say there's I'm just going to say there's 2 different kinds of basic synthesizer users. One is a keyboardist. The second one is the sampler. It's the DAW, digital audio workstation sampler person who's using an MPC or the computer or whatever, and they're going to create a bunch of wacky sounds, sample them, and then trigger them with a DAW later. Okay, essentially, right? And then you have a keyboard. You have a keyboardist, and this is a keyboard for somebody who's a keyboardist. It may only be 2 octaves, but it's for somebody who's going to play. They're going to play songs. They're going to play chords. They're going to play melodies. And it's for making those kinds of sounds. Okay? Now, granted, I wish it had more. I actually wish it had even more oscillators on it. But, for doing, some really thick polyphonic, chordal riffs, okay, that are super thick. But really, when it comes down to it, this thing does most of what you're going to need. So, mono mode. Here we go. We got this little envelope amount knob, and you get. I mean, these are classic synth bass sounds. This is the mono mode, so it's just this one oscillator in this case. Polyphonic mode. Let's change this up a little bit here. I'm going to kind of match all these knobs. They basically they're basically all doing the same thing. We've got the volume halfway up. We've got the tuning is all up to 12 o'clock, so everything is not out of tune. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later. It's one of the criticisms of this, which I think is quite hilarious, actually, is talking about how it's limited in its tuning. Yes, that's right. It's a fine-tune knob. Okay? It only goes up and down up to a half step. And we're going to get into why that's important later and why it's not necessarily a fail on the part of Akai on this. Okay, so here we got, I find that when in the polyphonic mode, that having that cut off up, it really helps kind of eliminate that bass, that too much rumble in the bass, and it helps. I'm going to turn down that distortion. Keyboard sound, and that's with 2. Let's see. It's got 2 different kind of saw wave, a square wave and a saw wave, and often when I'm doing the chordal stuff, I will put 2 of them in the 2 low ones in square. That can add a little bit of beef to the bottom, and then the saw on the top. Sorry about that. But those are the kind of sounds, polyphonic sounds, you can get that sound good. Just some examples. This is my mini brute here on the bottom. So one thing that I really like about these sounds is, it's maybe not my favorite polyphonic sound, but it reminds me a little bit of that older Van Halen OU812 album, like Feel So Good, a little bit of that kind of sound. And I can't even play that song. I don't know how it goes, but it has a little bit of that type of sound, kind of a more subdued chordal sound. Now, so that's the polyphonic mode. And it is, you can also get some, more wah or just kind of funky sounding polyphonic chordal sounds that sound okay. Not really what I'm into, but let's go into unison mode. Now, this is going to be a really important mode here. One thing that I hear the criticism of on other videos regarding this Timbre Wolf is the tuning knobs. They say, well, you can only go, you can't go up and down very high. And, that would be so awesome to, if they go up higher so we can do whatever, root fifth combinations or whatever they're thinking of, doing kind of those dance chords, which I understand. But you know what? I've got other synths. I've got other synths that do that, like this Behringer Toro right here that'll do that. And like I said, this is kind of a keyboard. This Timbre Wolf, in my opinion, is a keyboard for a keyboard player who knows how to play chords. Okay? They're going to know how to play chords. They're going to know how to play melodies. They're going to know what their notes are. Now, getting this thing into unison, this is what these things are for. They're for not only maybe potentially if you're, I guess, suppose if you're, if something is out of tune or something like that, you could fix it with that in theory without getting into the guts of this or whatever, and doing the auto tune, whatever it is, and I haven't even messed with that yet. But this is what they're for. The unison mode. This is going to get you that trance sound. Let's put all these on saw. And just slightly take one of the oscillators, put them up, and the other one down. Trance. That's what those tuning knobs are for. They're for that unison mode, especially so that you could detune. Give yourself that nice, thick, detuned, thick sound. Okay, monosynth sound. It's there. So we've got the wah. It'll do the wah basses. It'll do basic synth sounds. It'll do the thick stacks and detuned trance sounds, and then it'll do some basic chord stuff. It's got 4 voice, 4-note polyphony. There you go, and it's got this 32 step sequencer with variation up to 64. And what else do you want? It's got this, and another very funny review that I've seen of this is, oh, well, why did they make the overdrive so hot? I'm thinking, okay, this dude is not a guitarist. Whoever said this is not a guitarist, because you want your amp to go to 11, right? I mean, if you need to turn it down, turn it down. Okay? I mean, but they leave you plenty of overdrive. I don't really use it that much. Those are not maybe the types of sounds that I'm looking for, but it will, you can see I used it when I was using the mono setting. It was quite useful, actually, for just kind of like giving you that, maybe, if I'm saying this right, like the TB303 kind of sound, bass sound. In fact, let's just do that. Tune that oscillator. I mean, that's with the overdrive all the way up. When you're using chords, I find that the distortion, just like if you're a guitarist, you'll know this, that often if you're using really heavy distortion, playing, major chords or especially minor chords and more dissonant chords just don't normally sound that great versus, say, playing in octaves or playing a single note like a lead or playing power root fifth style chords. And that's just the same thing with this here. Is you've got a distortion circuit in here or whatever, and you're going to be able to, with that, overdrive those lead sounds and it's a distortion circuit all the way up. So at the end of the day, all of this comes down to understanding what this thing is for, what is it supposed to do, and knowing how to use it. It's not really that complicated, but I find it incredible that so many synth reviewers look at this and they go, oh, well, it doesn't have an LFO. I'm just sort of thinking, Well, you know what? If you're wanting to play chords and make do a song, do you really need this crazy cyclical sound? Because I don't. And, you know, I've got an LFO on this, on my Mini Brute. On my Toro, which is my favorite, and I'm a guitarist as well, play that with my Toro, and it doesn't have an LFO. And, you know, this thing will do, it has this envelope that will do, you know, make those bass wah sounds. And they're much easier to obtain on this than they are, say, something like this. You know, with my experience doing a Mini Brute, with a Mini Brute, I find it a lot easier to obtain a lot of these sounds that I want to get off of this. It's a simpler synth. It won't go crazy off the reservation. And if it does something I don't like, I can usually correct it relatively easily. So anyway, that's my take on the Timbre Wolf. I hope you enjoy this this video. And I guess I'll say like and subscribe. Like that's what so many other YouTubers do. I'm really kind of just starting out with this channel. I hope you like it. And I wish you guys well.